Way up north where the cold winds blow, there's a quiet change you ought to know. Not a shot, not a cry, not a stand, just a line redrawn by a distant hand. Hey, hey! 1774, Crown draws it tight, moves that border in the dead of night, down to the valley where the rivers run, land once fought for, lost and done. No jury call, no voices heard, just the governor say as the final word. From a law to a fear, from a fear to a flame, folks start whispering, this ain't just a game. Oh, Canada, what have they done? Drawing new lines in the northern sun. Oh, Canada, can't you see that same old rule is coming for me? Hear the call now across the land. Won't you join us? Take a stand. If it rises there, it won't stay still. It's rolling south at the king's own will.
The headline for the show page today at BillMick.com is Anarchy and Information Overload. If you click on that, go to that page, you'll also find a link to Dave Bowman and Dave Does History. Dave's been with us all day. Tuesdays at 8, he does bring us a look at history, and one that you're not going to get anywhere else, and it's a good one. We've been in the Liberty 250 series for better than a year now as we march on to July 4th of 1776, and that 250th anniversary coming up here this July. Dave, we're looking at Canada's role in our independence today. What are we talking about here, pal?
Well, it's in Canada, but we'll get there. There's an old proverb that says this: my enemy's enemy is my friend. Oftentimes this is attributed to the Arabs, but it actually comes from the Shanakaya, the 4th century BCE Sanskrit Indian text is the origination of this, and I butchered the name, sorry, but Chanayaka, forget it. It comes from India, from the 4th century BCE. That's all you need to know. And it's that text, that idea, the enemy of my enemy is my friend, that really enters into what we're looking at today. When we get to that grievance, it is remarkable how little we actually understand it. But it actually says Jefferson's words were there. He has for abolishing the free system of English laws in a neighboring province, comma, establishing therein an arbitrary government, comma, and enlarging its boundaries so as to render it at once an example and fit instrument for introducing the same absolute rule into these colonies. It's probably one of the least understood of all the grievances in the Declaration of Independence. And yet it's the one that literally scared the colonists more than all the others combined. The others made them angry, annoyed them, were irritating. But this one absolutely scared the colonials. And it's that frightened idea, this idea that this might actually succeed, that if you took all the other grievances off the table, probably still leads to the American Revolution.
And we pick it up in just a minute here on WMMB. It's Dave Does History on Bill Mick Live. So, Dave, if I understand this grievance correctly, the colonialists, they interpreted this as a threat to the colonies then.
This particular grievance is an existential threat. And what are we talking about here? What we're talking about here is the 1774 Quebec Act, which came at the same time the rest of the intolerable acts came along. This was the fourth one that was thrown in that didn't directly affect the colonies. It wasn't the Boston closing. It wasn't the dissolving of legislatures, any of that sort of things. What this did, the King of England as passed by Parliament, put his signature on this so-called Quebec Act. Now remember, Quebec is the capital of Canada. Canada of that day is not the Canada that we know today, technically. It's very French. In fact, there are about maybe, Bill, 90,000 people in all of Canada. Maybe. Of those 90,000, at least 85,000 of them are French citizens who have been there since the time that the French ruled Canada. Mm-hmm. It was captured during the 7 Years' War, the French and Indian War. Remember the campaign into Canada. England captures Canada, and now it's English. Hooray! And all these French people who have grown up as Roman Catholics under the French monarchy, all of a sudden threw that aside and went, well, I guess now we're English, right?
Probably not.
What? You mean the French in Canada refused to just give up their old ways?
They hadn't learned to surrender yet. They were too far away from France.
You ever been to Quebec lately? I mean, they still haven't. So these people...
love Quebec. I made multiple trips in as a minor league umpire. Wonderful place. Wonderful people.
Très bien. But they're French, and they're not English. And France is a Roman Catholic stalwart. France and Spain they're Roman Catholic, and they are going to buy that. They don't want to join this English stuff. So England has this very difficult time managing Canada because the Canadians, the habitants as they are known, don't really want to be English. They want to continue being Canadian. They want to continue being French, and they don't really like the English much. So by the time 1774 rolls around, England, with its hands full of American resistance, American argument and intransigence, decides that maybe now's the time to do something about this Canadian problem that we have. And so they pass this Quebec Act, which does several things. Number one, it enlarges Canada. Canada now gets all the territory that we won during the 7 Years' War, all that territory west of the Alleghenies, all the way to the Mississippi River, Ohio, Kentucky, Michigan, Indiana, Illinois. All of that becomes Quebec. It becomes Canada. So all of that land that the American colonials believed that they were fighting to win, to earn, that the king then said, no, you can't have, he just gives to Canada, to Quebec. That's an irritant right there, right? I mean, we fought them for it. Why are you giving it back to them? That's number one. But number two, it restored French civil law and established a government run by a crown-appointed governor and council with no elected legislature, assembly, or juries. So now there is a English-appointed French governor of Quebec who runs things according to French civil law on English territory. Anybody got a problem with that?
Yeah, I would say a lot of folks.
Especially since French civil law is arbitrary. There's no jury whatsoever. So if you're, accused of a crime or whatever, you're basically judged by a judge, and your sentence is approved by the governor. That's it. There's no system here under the English Constitution of English laws. This arbitrary law is not what we fought for, even if we could get into the land that you just gave to Canada. But the biggest piece of this bill is it restores the free practice of Roman Catholicism, and it restores the Catholic Church's power to collect tithes. Now, tithes today, as we see them, tend to be a voluntary gift, right? I mean, I spent 7 years as a pastor. I can assure you that nobody is putting a gun to anybody's head and saying, give me your tithe. At least not outside of Utah, anyway. But as a general rule of thumb, that's not happening. But under the French rule of the Catholic Church in the 1700s, you could see the tithe as a tax that was collected now by the church. The church would show up on your doorstep and say, hey, we haven't gotten your tithe this week, this month, this year, whatever. Fork it over.
So are they then sharing those tithes, ostensibly going to the church, with the French-run British government then?
Yeah, it goes to the French government of Canada to expand French influence and all these kinds of things. It also removed the oath, the Test Act, that you had to take in order to be a British official. To be a government official, you have to take the Test Act, in which you swear allegiance to the King of England, and you promise that you're a Protestant. Go back to 1688, the Glorious Revolution. Parliament puts William and Mary on the throne instead of James, after throwing James II out, and that becomes the oath. You will be a Protestant. And under English law today, only a Protestant can be King of England, period. That's still law. But now that's taken out, at least in Quebec. So now the people running Quebec don't have to pledge loyalty to the king. They don't have to promise that they're Protestants. And I can't emphasize this enough, folks, and I know it seems strange to us today. But imagine a religion that is the opposite of everything you are. They believe what you don't believe. You're just butting heads. You don't have anything in common except that you both believe that you're right. You both believe that the other side is going to hell. And the more of you I take with me, the better, right? That's the kind of religious belief I want you to imagine. And now all of a sudden, the King of England has just made Quebec a Catholic nation, expanded its borders, and now, for all practical purposes, the 13 United Colonies are surrounded on the north and west by Canada and on the south by Spain. All Catholic, and all with the same goal of expanding the Catholic faith, because that's what they do. How does that make you feel? Are you afraid of what will happen if they succeed?
You would think so. A little nervous.
Well, believe me, this did not make the Colonials happy at all.
And we see how it went when Dave Does History continues in moments, right here on Bill Mick Live.
This is Dave Does History on Bill Mick Live.
And before we jump back into how it's Canada's fault that we are considering revolution in the colonies, I'll remind you at BillMick.com, head to the contest page for the Central Florida Dream Home Makeover, opportunity for you to pick up a new asphalt shingle roof valued up to $25,000 from Eustis Roofing, or maybe $4,500 toward an electrical panel or services from Frank Gay Services. All the details there on the contest page at BillMick.com. Good luck. I'd like to see you spruce up your home a little bit. So, Dave, the colonies are nervous because they are, in essence, now, because of this act of the Parliament and the King, surrounded by Catholic states that they don't want to be. They left for religious freedom, in part, is why they were there in the first place. And now they've got the nerves over this, and they see this as a pretty significant threat.
Well, and it's hard to really explain this to people today, because today we don't necessarily have the same biases. Now, maybe you believe what you believe, and maybe you believe that the Catholics are all going to hell, or maybe you believe the Protestants are all going to hell, or whatever. But we're not shooting at each other over this, as much of history has been. In the Middle Ages, this was the war, was Protestantism versus Catholicism. They fought wars over this. They killed people over this. They burned people at the stake over this. And, you know, this was not this gentle disagreement that we have now. And more importantly, from a colonial viewpoint, the King of England, the Crown of England, takes a specific oath. What does that oath say? How many of you know? Bueller? Well, I won't read you the whole oath, but there are 3 portions of it, and the third one reads this: The Archbishop of Canterbury will ask the Prince of Wales or the Princess, will you, to the utmost of your power, maintain the laws of God, the true profession of the gospel, and the Protestant Reformed religion established by law? And will you maintain and preserve inviolatably the settlement of the Church of England and its doctrine, worship, discipline, and government? To which the Prince of Wales must answer, all of this I promise to do. And King George III did, as did King Chuck a few weeks ago.
Right.
They raised they swear that they will uphold the Church of England. Now he signs a law saying, go be Catholic. The reaction to this is visceral. It's horror. It's terrifying. And it leads to what will become the American campaign in Canada. We will send a couple of emissaries to Canada. Ben Franklin will be one of them. The second one is a guy by the name of Charles Carroll. Hopefully you watched that video this past week that I put on Dave Does History about Charles Carroll. He's the richest man in America, and he's Roman Catholic. And we send him, along with Ben Franklin, to Canada with letters to say, hey, you should join us. We're on the same side, really. We really are. Neither of us like the King of England, so why don't you join us? But because of the Quebec Act, because the Roman Catholic Church has been restored in Canada, the priests are instructed by their leadership to tell their congregation, because most of Canada is illiterate, folks. Unlike America, these Canadians, these habitants, as they are known, must have the letters read to them. And they're told by their priests that this is all lies, and that what they're trying to do, see what the Americans did to Maryland, which was originally a Catholic colony. See what they did to the Catholics in America. They want to do that to you here too. So don't listen to them, because if you do, you will lose what the King of England has given us. So we should be loyal to the King of England, kind of, but still be Catholics. And so the mission of Charles Carroll and Benjamin Franklin fails. So Congress decides, well, we can't convince them. I guess we'll have to invade.
We pick it up in a minute on WMMB. So, Dave, the colonies did what any civilized people would do, try to settle this through diplomacy. They go to Canada, and they just forgot the magic words that they needed as they were speaking to the Canadians, which were surrender pronto or we'll level Toronto.
Well, let us keep in mind that 1700s France wasn't exactly, the surrender monkeys that we call them today.
That's true.
And let us also not forget that at the same time we're doing this, we are trying to gain allies through the world. And my enemy's enemy is my friend. And who's the enemy of England? France and Spain. So who are we trying to convince to join us? But the Canadians, the Les Habitants, as they are known, they just seem recalcitrant, and they're pretty happy with the arrangement they have, and so they're going to maintain this French colony inside of England, and they're getting their way. Why would they join us? This leads to the American invasion of Canada from the fall of 75 to the spring of 76. We haven't spent a lot of time on this, and we're not going to, because, number one, it's not hugely impactful on the ideas of liberty and those kinds of things, and it's a colossal failure. Okay, it's one of the this thing. I don't want to be flippant or anything here, but we try a two-pronged invasion led by Richard Montgomery and Benedict Arnold. Yes, that Benedict Arnold. And they invade Canada. They manage to capture Montreal, which sounds impressive until you realize that Montreal in 1776 or 1775 is, it's a stockade. It's not Montreal as we know it today. By the time we get to Quebec, however, the winter has just ravaged our armies, and we're having, let's just call them, difficulties in our command structure, because Benedict Arnold and Richard Montgomery see things differently. And Benedict Arnold is starting to feel unappreciated. And the battle at Quebec is just December 31st, January 1st, 1776 is just an utter disaster. It's a massacre. And we lose that battle and we start running away because, that's what you do. By this time, British troops have arrived to reinforce the Canadians, and they began to chase us through the Canadian wilderness, the northern wilderness there in Canada and northern New York and Maine and those areas. And it's almost funny the way this whole thing goes down. What comes out of this, though, is that we managed to slow the British down so much that they are unable to launch the offensive that the King wants launched from Canada into New York. And we delay that. It's literally the only accomplishment of the entire Canadian adventure. But now we're thrown out of Canada, and we're still surrounded by Catholics, and we're still surrounded by British troops. And it's really frosting our shorts, and it's scaring people because they're starting to realize that if the King can establish this kind of government in Quebec, he means to do it here. And what if he just decides, screw them, we'll make them all Catholics?
Was that an accurate assumption?
Seemed to be to them.
That it did, and we'll see where it goes when we continue in moments right here with Dave Does History on Bill Mick Live.
Thanks for making WMMB the Space Coast's #1 preset on the iHeartRadio app. The top of the app, right at your fingertips, anytime.
You can also add with those presets at the top of the iHeartRadio app, Bill Mick Live podcasts, Dave Does History podcast, What the Frock podcast, all of them at the tip of your fingers there, top of the app, whenever you're ready for the content we're throwing your way. Nice to have you along on a Tuesday as Dave Bowman bringing us Dave Does History. And Dave, so the Americans, well, the colonialists, they do not succeed in Canada other than slowing the Brits down in their reinforcement thereof and an attack into northern colonies there. Where are we sitting now?
Yeah, that effect won't be felt until 1777 when the Saratoga campaign gets underway, which of course ends in disaster for the British, which, by the way, proves to the French that we are viable and that they can become our allies. So maybe something good came of it. Maybe if we capture Quebec, who knows how this ends. But in the meantime, what you've got here are British Whig Protestants in America. For them, Protestantism is synonymous with free press, representative government, and constitutional law. That's what it means to be a Protestant in America in 1775. Conversely, it also means that Roman Catholicism is the opposite of all of those things. Congressman John Sullivan will warn this cursed religion, Catholicism, is dangerous to the state, and it's favorable to despotism. It's royal. I mean, it certainly supports kings.
It thrives off favor to and from the king.
Right. I really need you to understand this divisiveness because we don't feel it today, at least not when it comes to Catholicism. None of us go to bed tonight worried about what the Roman Catholics are going to do. Well, maybe you do, but if you do, you're a very rare commodity. Nobody's waking
None
up
of us are going to
night.
sleep tonight in Ireland, so we're okay.
Right. On the other hand, Ron DeSantis signed a new law meant to protect Florida from Sharia law. Signed your HB 1471. It bans Florida courts from applying or enforcing foreign or religious laws if doing so would violate constitutional rights. So we still have those same mindsets. They've just moved in a different way, haven't they? Still there. In 1960, John Kennedy, Fitzgerald Kennedy, had to take time out from his campaign. The campaign about missile gaps and foreign policy and Cuba and all these things. Remember this? And in 1960, he had to give a televised speech about what? yes, I'm a Roman Catholic, but no, I'm not going to let the Pope run the country.
Yeah.
I don't know how many of you remember that speech or even saw it or even knew about it. But even as late as 1960, a lot of this anti-Catholicism was still bleeding into things.
Which kind of surprised me when he won West Virginia.
Yeah, it really did. In 2008, we had a similar situation with Mitt Romney having to defend his faith. Joe Lieberman had to defend his faith. These kinds of things to us, there's still echoes of this whole idea that we still had in 1775 and 1776, with not quite the visceral hatred that we have. None of us are willing to go to war with Roman Catholics or LDS or anybody else, but we still have those same concerns. And it's this Quebec Act, then, that the king signs. And this is important to keep in mind. The king took a vow, a coronation vow, to defend the Protestant Church of England. And then he signs the Quebec Act, which says, hey, Roman Catholics in my dominion, go ahead and be Roman Catholic. And oh, by the way, I might need you to help me suppress the rebellion. And once you suppress the rebellion, well, we'll see what happens then. Maybe we'll let you be in charge of America. Do you start to see why the Americans were concerned deeply and frightened by this? And in fact, it's the Quebec Act, not the Boston Port Act, not the Massachusetts Government Act, not the Tea Act, none of that stuff. It's this Quebec Act that really begins to become a massive unifying force. The Quebec Act threatens collectively the religious, constitutional, and territorial interests of all 13 colonies. Remember, all this land that the king just gave them is in Virginia's and Pennsylvania's and New York's charters. That's their land by charter. And now the king is saying, nope. It becomes a litmus test. The Quebec Act becomes a litmus test for Protestants, or for patriots, in the colonies, to weed out British supporters. If you support the Quebec Act, if you support this idea of free religion in Canada, you're obviously a Tory and you're an enemy of liberty. And because it's the king who signs this, because it's the king who signs this act, the king who swore an oath to uphold and defend the Church of England and Protestant religion, who signs off on this, it really begins to shift the anger from Parliament to the king, because now it's the king who has violated his coronation oath. And now we really begin to focus the anger and the fear at George III. And these are the kinds of things that still echo today. This past week, King Chuck, who took that same oath, made a public broadcast in which he greeted all of his his Muslim subjects. Okay, I mean, it's a different world, right, Dave? And then the palace issued a specific, pointed note that said the king will not be issuing an Easter greeting. How do you think England feels about that? And
maybe they're ready to overthrow Chuck.
Maybe. And now you begin to understand how we felt about the Quebec Act.
Again, it's 321-768-1240 if you've got questions or comments on this. So, Dave, wars and rumors of wars and religion being a major factor therein, probably didn't know it had been such a factor on this continent until we had today.
Not only is it a major factor, it is probably the major factor, which makes sense. I mean, why did the Pilgrims come to Plymouth to begin with?
Yeah.
Religious differences. So, yeah, I mean, this is the this combination of the Quebec Act's arbitrary governance, along with the failed campaign into Canada, it proves to the colonials that there's no reconciliation possible here with England. He's unleashing Catholics on us, and that's a problem. And this is actually convincing to Americans that the only way to preserve their traditional liberties was a complete and irrevocable separation from Great Britain. And that's what Thomas Paine wrote. That's what they came to believe. That's what the Quebec Act actually accomplished. It did what England wanted. It ran Canada, but it also ran us right out of the Dominion.
Interesting. And the conflict with Canada appearing to be a defeat, but yet contributing to success down the road. And the point you made about having success there, showing Canada they could have a reliable ally in the United States.
Well, and it's kind of interesting because if you look now at the relationship between us and Canada through the years, we say we're allies, but have we ever really been, pro-Canada? You can look at a hockey rink and say we're not. I can tell you for myself that, as a Flyers fan, I've always hated the Canadiens, the Montreal Canadiens. But now that I know that their actual name is the Habitants, who were the people that refused to join the revolution, the Canadians that refused to join the revolution were the Habitants. Now I hate the Canadians even more.
I'll tell you what.
Philadelphia is, the home of the revolution.
For that time I spent in the Northern League and with a team in Quebec City, La Capitale, great baseball town. That's probably a 3,600 seat stadium, and it was full every night. Rain, cold. We opened up Memorial Day here in the U.S. one year, and it was rainy and cold in Quebec City. And we had the stands full when baseball season came to town. They took great care of us, made great friends. We had one of their umpires join us on the crew every trip up, and they had a nice group of 2 or 3 umpires that were capable and coming in and working with us when we had those times. And just made some good friends. Their other officiating buddies, both from baseball and hockey, would join us after the game for dinner or going out and playing a game of pool while we wind down, whatever it might have been. And just absolutely great people. They're friends to this day and really good folks.
Well, they're good. I just a little bit here about Canada, but we need to understand that in 1775, this was the argument. And the idea that the king, who swore an oath to uphold Protestantism, was it trying to unleash Catholics on us? Mm-hmm. Was abysmal to us. And then we allied with the French anyway. So my enemy's enemy is my friend.
Well, and that's where that all went. What are we taking a look at as we move into next week, Dave?
Next week, we go back to North Carolina. Remember the battle at Moores Creek Bridge?
Yes.
Well, that led to some interesting developments in North Carolina, and North Carolina is going to start leading the way to independence. We are so close, folks. We are in the middle of April already. By June, this whole thing's going to be in draft mode, and we'll be just about done.
That's very, very cool as we march up to the 250th anniversary of that declaration. We've been going through the reasons therefore for over a year now with Dave Does History, which has been a lot of fun. And we'll continue that trek next Tuesday in our 8 o'clock hour. Dave Bowman, thank you, my friend. It has been a good day. I appreciate you taking the time and waking up really early in Silverdale, Washington to spend your time with us here.
Let us carry through wind and snow. Join the cause, don't you know? Montgomery marches on 02. Through frozen roads, they're pushing through. City walls and the winter's bite. Turn back hope in the dead of night. Now the king signs off and the balance breaks. Not just land, but the oath he takes. Sacred trust now cast aside, and something shifts like an incoming tide. From blaming men to the crown itself, you can't hide truth on a dusty shelf. Tavern talk gets sharp and fast. This is how our rights won't last. What they built up north that day might sweep our freedoms clean away. If one falls silent under the throne, how long till we stand there alone? From doubt to dread, from dread to stand, you feel that tremble across the land. Oh, Canada, hear the sound, liberty's voice going round and round. Oh, Canada, take your side, history's turning with the tide. Hear the call now across the land, won't you join us, take a stand. If your eyes is there, it won't stay still. It's rolling south at the King's own will. Oh, Canada, one last plea. What you become is what we'll be. Oh, Canada, the line is drawn. A quiet law, then a brand new dawn. Hear it echo hand to hand. Won't you join us, take a stand? 'Cause freedom's not just a word you say. It's a choice you make when it comes your way.